Hello class, today we're going to start chapter 3 part 2, the last section. So I know this has gone by pretty fast. This is not too big of a section, but it does hold a lot of information. So just be aware though, even though it's short, it does have a lot of information, so make sure you're continuously looking over it and studying. So this section ends with tissue repair, wound healing, and the body actually has many techniques for protecting itself from uninvited guests. So when I say the word uninvited guests, I mean things like bacteria, viruses, toxins, dust, anything that can get inside your body that shouldn't be there, and protects from injury. So things like the skin. The skin is actually our first line of defense. It's what's going to protect things from getting inside you. So viruses and bacteria, if they get on your skin, they don't normally get inside you unless you take your skin and you touch your mouth, your eyes. Those are entry points. Your nose. Now, some places are covered in a mucous membrane, and that will keep some things out, not everything. So things that have a mucous membrane are your eyeballs are kind of what they secrete a fluid that help. Your mouth creates a fluid that helps. Your nose creates a fluid that helps. In fact, your respiratory tract is lined with cilia that we've talked about before. These are little projections, and what they do is they secrete mucus to trap dust and stuff, and then the cilia move it to where we either cough it up and out, or we can cough it up and we swallow it. Last, we also have strong acid in our stomach, so a lot of things can't survive in the strong hydrochloric acid that our stomach produces, and that can also kill a lot of things. Now, while we do have these techniques for protecting ourselves, they are not 100% foolproof. We actually do get sick. We do experience injury. And when injury does occur, usually it stimulates one of two responses. We usually have inflammatory response, and then we have an immune response. And then after that happens, we start to heal, get better, hopefully. So I talked about these two things, so let's actually define them. So inflammation, this is a general, so it's not specific, body response that attempts to prevent further injury. So here, this is where if you've ever experienced inflammation, your skin kind of gets red, hot, swollen. For example, if you twist an ankle, it gets swollen, blood rushes to the area. That blood is going to carry things from your immune system. It's going to carry things that help you clot, anything like that. Your immune system, this is actually a very specific attack against a recognized invader. So it recognizes, hey, you're being invaded by bacteria, you're being invaded by a virus, and it starts to release B and T cells, which are part of your immune system, or white blood cells, to fight off this invader. So usually if you get a vaccine, the vaccine injects you with a dead virus, and the next time that you get that virus, your body recognizes it, and again, immune system takes response and attacks it. Now, tissue repair, wound healing. This tissue can get torn inside your throat. You've ever had a sore throat? It can get torn inside your body in ulcers. You can have a cut on your skin. Well, whenever you do have tissue damage, wound healing can occur one of two ways. The first way is through regeneration. Regeneration is defined as the replacement of destroyed tissue by the same kind of cells. For example, if I cut my skin and I cut into the dermis and the epidermis layer through both of those, they're going to be replaced by the same type of tissue cells that make up those two layers. However, the second type is fibrosis. And this is repair by dense or fibrous connective tissue, and it often appears as a scar, so scar tissue. Sometimes you can cut yourself and it heals and it looks like nothing ever happened. But sometimes if you cut yourself deep enough or you burn yourself enough, you're going to make that scar tissue that's a little bit lighter than the rest of your skin. So which one's going to occur? Well, like we've kind of hinted at, one is going to depend on the type of tissue damaged. Some tissues heal better than others, depending, remember what we said, vascular versus avascular? So if it's vascularized, which means there's a lot of blood flow to it, typically those do heal faster and regeneration typically occurs. Whereas for things that are avascular, like tendons and ligaments, if they get hurt, they're going to take a long time to repair, and fibrosis generally occurs there. Also, it depends on the severity of the injury. If you get a small little paper cut, it's going to heal like nothing ever happened. But I got a pretty bad burn on my arm from the oven, and I have a permanent white scar there. The other thing is whether which one occurs, clean cuts are going to heal more successfully than if there were ragged tears in the tissue. So let's talk about the events of tissue repair. There are 3 major events, and several things happen during those 3 major events. The first one is usually inflammation sets the stage. So your body starts releasing chemicals known as inflammatory chemicals. And what these chemicals do is they make your capillaries very permeable. So your capillaries are your tiny blood vessels, if you did not know that. And if you don't know what permeable means, it means that things can flow in and out very easily. So what happens when these capillaries become very permeable is clotting proteins are going to leave the blood vessel and migrate to area from the bloodstream. So for example, they're going to leave that capillary, go to wherever the injury was, and start clotting. And then a claw wall and cuts off on that injured area, so you kind of stop bleeding. The second major event is granulation tissue. Now, if I had to talk about granulation tissue, it's going to be defined as a delicate pink tissue. So the way granulation tissue forms is there is going to start the growth of new capillaries. You have been cut somehow, that's usually how you bleed. Well, new capillaries are going to carry things like nutrients for you to regrow that part of the tissue, oxygen, everything you're going to need. Now, these new capillaries grow, but beware, they are very fragile because they are small. And so if for some reason you pick that scab or that clot, it's going to start bleeding again. So if you've ever had a scab and you've picked it, well, that's exactly why it's going to start bleeding. Now, inside where these new capillaries are growing, you're going to have something called phagocytes. So phago means eating. So these are eating cells. And these cells come in and they eat away that blood clot and they release fibroblasts. They get rid of those fibroblasts. And what they do is what happens is collagen fibers are going to start rebuilding that new tissue or that scar tissue. So regeneration and fibrosis affect permanent repair. Wow, cannot say that. This is the third one. So regeneration and fibrosis affect permanent repair. Once you actually get all that tissue or scar tissue underneath it all healed up, the scab detaches. Now, as that's happening, most of you guys can realize that scabs sometimes get super itchy, and that itchiness is from those new capillaries and the phagocytes building new tissue. Eventually, it builds enough tissue that your scab detaches on its own. And whether a scar is visible or invisible, again, like we've talked about on a previous slide, depends on the severity of the wound and the tissue that got damaged. So the last thing we're going to talk about is tissues that regenerate easily. So epithelial tissue, like skin and mucous membranes, are going to regenerate really easily. So these, again, are found in your respiratory tract. They're going to found on the epidermis of your skin. Fibrous connective tissues and bone actually regenerate pretty easily as well. If you have a broken bone, it's going to regenerate and heal a lot faster than, like we said before, if you tore a ligament or a tendon. So tissues that regenerate poorly are going to be things like skeletal muscle. If you pull a muscle, it hurts so bad. And then tissues that are going to be replaced largely with scar tissue, that means if you damage them, you're going to have things like cardiac muscle and nervous tissue in the brain and spinal cord. If you've ever heard the word contusion, if you've had a brain contusion, that means you have either had a slight concussion and you've damaged part of your brain. And they see that when they check out your brain as scar tissue, they can see that scar tissue. So that's the end of the lesson. Let me know if you have any questions. I will say a heads up, your book does contain a lot of information and a lot more pictures if you would like to see any, and you might have to use your book on your homework assignment. So let me know if you have any questions.